Today's episode is sponsored by Spartan Chemical Company. Family owned and operated since 1956, Spartan Chemical is a leading manufacturer of superior and cost-effective specialty chemical products sold through select, trusted distributors. At Spartan Chemical, we make clean simple. For more information, please visit spartanchemical.com.
Our topic today on Straight Talk is about buildings and how using them has changed since the pandemic. Yes, they may be open, they may be ready for business, but are they occupied like they were pre-pandemic? Well, no, the evidence indicates they're not. So today we're going to speak to you facility managers, building owners, anyone involved in running buildings, managing them. And an expert with me to talk about this is Randy Burke, the CEO and founder of DCS Global. Randy, welcome.
Jeff, thanks so much. Always enjoy these talks.
Me as well. Randy, this topic, I did some online research before we got on our interview today. What a global issue this is. Tell us, what are you seeing with low building user occupancy? I mean, isn't the pandemic basically over?
You know, I guess the pandemic, you might say, is over, but the post-pandemic reality is here. You know, hybrid work schedules and working from home has been such a disruptor in how buildings are being used. And I mean, that I think is one of the single biggest drivers in that, in fact, there is no real system about how to work from home and at the office back and forth. So, you know, buildings essentially are underused right now. You know, recent data that I've gotten from some BOMA chapters are, you know, offices on average are about 50% occupied compared to the pre-pandemic period. Now that doesn't include vacancy, which is fine. It's not leased space. We're talking actual, you know, bums in the seats are not there, about half. So it's a big deal.
I mean, I think most looking at this issue would say, well, if there's fewer people, the building must be easier to be cared for. I don't know if that's the case, but tell us this, Randy, what are some of the strategies you see facility managers using to take care of their buildings?
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, building uses and leases themselves are being reduced. Vacancy is climbing. So, you know, a lot of contracts are out of date. They're not built to be flexible for these major changes in terms of the amount of staff it takes to properly, you know, to scale down to what needs to be cleaned. So what we're seeing really is that, you know, our clients are having us develop, you know, more efficient cleaning models. We've developed an occupancy credit calculator. Essentially, it's a calculation that, you know, yes, you got to clean the common area. Yes, you got to clean the tenant common area. But if half the people aren't in their chairs, you know, you don't have to clean those. And so, you know, that we've developed this calculator that has a sliding scale based on, you know, what the occupancy level was pre-pandemic and now what it is post-pandemic. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're seeing is alternate day cleaning. You know, so the building itself, as I mentioned, common areas need to be cleaned, but offices are getting less soiled, they're less people, so they're kind of doing them every second day. So that's one. Another thing they're doing. There's a resurgence in daytime cleaning, daylight cleaning. There's this day staff that are there, which again are somewhat underutilized because of the population is so down. So they can do some of the office space and such. And this brings us back to the benefits of daytime cleaning. So I think that's really what we're seeing. Also, which is interesting, is as leases shrink, property facility managers are putting retail stores, schools, all sorts of different facilities in what used to be purely office buildings.
Okay, good information. Now, I know you have clients you talk to, you consult with. What are they asking you to help with managing costs and quality?
Yeah, really they're looking for portfolio-wide programs. Things like I mentioned before. We're going to, we'll set up a baseline and then do occupancy credit calculations. We do them a month ahead of time. So what the tenants and users predict what their actual occupancy is going to be, because it is getting into patterns now. We all know that Monday and Friday are quiet days in the office because people don't, they're taking long weekends essentially and working from home. So, there's a variety of programs. You set up the occupancy credit program, then install it across a set of buildings. Defining best practices. There's hygiene concerns now, visual standards. A lot of buildings are being over cleaned because they've got way too many staff for the amount of people that are in there. So, what are some best practices in actually doing inspections and understanding what clean is when there's maybe 5 people on an environment, on an office floor. Visual cues. Sometimes there's these little tent cards. The desk has been used. It has not been used. The tenant will switch it, so the cleaner can whiz right down the corridor and say yes, 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 no, I have to clean that one. And the other thing, of course, is the driver of ESG, environmental, social responsibility, and governance. Those key elements are critical. And so, building into any cleaning program, you've got to be able to be not just green cleaning, but, are you able to pay your people well? Is there oversight on what you're doing, either internally or externally? So those are some of the things, the items that we're really being asked to bring forward.
You mentioned Friday and Mondays being lower usage days. Well, my Mondays are crazy. I wish I could say the same, but Friday globally is probably a better day for most people.
Yeah, exactly.
Our last point, Randy, let's talk about this, especially contractors.
Yeah.
How does doing all this keep clients? Can you talk about that?
Transparency is the first thing. I mean, everybody knows it's new. So, contractors have to maintain their margins. I think they had a great win over the actual pandemic, bring in a lot of doorknob polishers at high rates, spray down the space, all of that. But now it's now what is sustainable and fair going forward. So we really say transparency is key. Tell them how much staff you need. Put the wages where they need to be. We believe that the more information you can give your client, we're going to put in some new technology. Maybe we're going to do some of our own ATP testing. There's all sorts of things you can do. Be as efficient as you can, but be transparent. And I think that's where you're going to keep your clients, possibly avoid going to market, and just re-sign. Under the current, tight labor market, I think clients are willing to do that. They don't want to see any more disruption in their cleaning service. So, again, transparency. And the next key thing is flexibility. We are in a very fluid environment, and people, companies sometimes are saying thou must go back to work, and they better be ready to gear up. And who knows what the next virus is? And boy, it's really unknown. So and then you get into all the other economic drivers, inflation, and things like that. So I think transparency and flexibility are the two key elements that contractors can bring into their business, make it part of their culture, so that they can survive and thrive.
Randy, some good advice here. Thank you for this. You mentioned when employers say come back to work, we think that's pretty simple. Just come back to work. Well, the building has to be ready. There's a lot of moving parts there. And your thought about the next pandemic, whether it's a pandemic or an epidemic or whatever it is, there's always going to be something to be concerned with. So we'll always have something to talk about.